You think you've seen pain, you think you've known conviction, but nothing prepared me for that single moment. I wasn't in a war room, I wasn't conducting a hard-hitting interview, I was simply standing in a broken street in Gaza, a place the world debates from plush studios, but rarely dares to truly understand. And that's when I saw him, a boy, no older than 8, sitting on a pile of debris that used to be his home. His clothes were torn, his forehead was dusty, he had no shoes. In one hand, he held half a piece of bread, and in the other, a small plastic soldier, scorched at the edges. No tears, no tantrum, just silence, just eyes. And those eyes, I'll never forget them. Because they didn't plead, they didn't accuse, they simply looked right through me as if asking a question I had never prepared for. What do you believe in now, Mr. Morgan? That one gaze shattered something in me. It didn't accuse me of anything directly, but it exposed everything I had built around myself. The pride, the certainties, the arrogance that comes with having a platform, with thinking you've seen enough suffering to become numb to it. But that stare pierced through all of it. It was not political. It wasn't even religious in the traditional sense. It was spiritual, almost divine. And asked, does your faith mean anything in a world where children suffer like this? You see, we're taught to look up for truth, to study it, read it, debate it, but sometimes the purest truth is found staring back at you from the dirt. I've been in churches. I've spoken to archbishops. I've read theology. But I have never, not once, been moved as deeply as I was in that moment by a boy who had lost everything and yet seemed to carry a strength I had never known. He didn't preach, he didn't scream, he simply existed, resilient, broken, alive. And that made me question the very foundation of my belief. Because let's be honest, it's easy to talk about God in a climate-controlled studio. It's easy to believe when everything's going your way. But what happens to your faith when you're the one buried beneath rubble? When you've lost your family? When every headline forgets your name, but you still whisper, God is with me? That boy made me realize faith isn't proven by comfort, it's revealed through crisis. And I, for all my success and security, was the one who suddenly felt bankrupt. Because his silence said more than any sermon ever could. It asked, do you even know what it means to believe anymore? And I didn't have an answer. Let's not kid ourselves. We've gotten comfortable, far too comfortable. We sip our coffee, scroll our timelines, post filtered quotes about faith, and think we've understood suffering. We talk about patience when the Wi-Fi is slow. We speak of gratitude after a good meal. We define strength as surviving Monday. But faith, real, gut-wrenching, tested in the fire faith, that isn't forged in comfort. It's born in crisis. And it took one haunting scene in Palestine to slap me out of my Western days and force me to face that reality. I watched a man, blood on his sleeve, dust in his beard, lift his injured child into a battered truck. There was no ambulance, no siren, no dramatic music, just urgency, just pain. And yet, no screaming, no curses, no questioning of God. Only a whispered, broken Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. That word, uttered with such dignity in the most undignified moment, made me stop breathing for a second. Because how do you explain that? How do you justify it with logic? We in the West lose a job and wrestle with doubt. We face minor heartbreak and spiral into existential crisis. But here was a father who had possibly lost everything and yet still thanked his creator. That scene, it shattered my framework. I realized then how soft we've become. Faith has become a fashion accessory, a weekly ritual, something we do, not something we live. We debate verses like armchair scholars, while people in Gaza bleed their beliefs into the dirt. And that contrast, that discomfort, it's exactly what I needed. See, comfort creates a bubble, one that slowly, silently disconnects you from the rawness of real life. It turns faith into theory. It lulls you into a state where you only ever thank God when things go your way. But in Palestine, they thank him regardless, not because their life is perfect, but because their belief is real. And that kind of unshakable gratitude shook me, because I had spent years thinking I had faith, but the truth is I only had conditions. I praised God when the lights were on, when the mortgage cleared, when my family was safe. But would I have whispered Alhamdulillah with my child in my arms and bombs overhead? That's what comfort does. It tricks you into thinking you're strong until reality tests you. And it wasn't a religious text that exposed me. It was that moment, that raw, human, unscripted moment. One man, one child, one prayer. And suddenly, all my well-rehearsed beliefs felt manufactured, because real faith, raw, bleeding, unfiltered faith, doesn't come with microphones and lighting. It comes when your world is falling apart and you still find the courage to say, God is enough. And that's what I knew. I had seen faith, but I had never lived it. We live in a world obsessed with words. Everyone has a platform. Everyone has something to say. Belief is broadcast, not embodied. People wear faith like a badge, quote scriptures like slogans, and convince themselves that knowing the text is the same as living the truth. But there's a difference, and it's enormous. Because speeches don't prove anything. Sacrifice does. And in Palestine, I saw sacrifice that silenced everything I thought I knew about belief. I stood behind a woman, face veiled, eyes hollow yet fiercely alive, as she knelt beside the grave of her son. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a fighter, he was a child taken too soon in a world that pretends it cares. And yet, there she was. No cameras, no screaming, no vengeance in her voice, just soft words of prayer and a strength that defied every assumption I'd ever made. That moment, it didn't just move me, it dismantled me. Because I've seen grief in many forms. I've interviewed people after disasters, after crimes, after public tragedy, but I had never seen grief wrapped in gratitude. This woman had lost what many of us couldn't even bear to imagine. And her response wasn't rage, it was remembrance. She raised her hands and thanked God, not for the loss, but for the time she had with her son, for the honor of being tested, for the chance to reunite in the next life. That's not delusion, that's devotion. And it made me confront a harsh truth. I've mistaken comfort for conviction. I've judged faith by how articulate it sounded, not how authentically it was lived. This woman didn't quote from a book, she was the book, breathing the verses in real time, in pain, with purpose. She didn't need applause. We are the makers of our... She didn't need validation. Her sacrifice was her testimony. In that moment, I realized that belief isn't proven by how loudly you defend it. It's proven by what you're willing to lose for it. And she had lost more than I ever had. Yet somehow her faith had grown. We like to think we're strong because we can argue, debate, defend. But what happens when life takes away what you love most? Do you crumble or do you cling to your creator? That woman, that silent warrior, showed me that real faith doesn't ask why. It whispers, even now, I believe. And that shook me because I knew I hadn't reached that level. I wasn't even close. It's easy to speak of sacrifice when you've never had to make one. But when you stand before a mother mourning her child and she still praises God, you stop talking. You start listening. And more importantly, you start questioning whether you've ever truly believed anything at all. I've spent my life asking difficult questions, challenging leaders, pushing boundaries, but no headline, no debate, no fiery interview ever hit me as hard as the silence I witnessed in Gaza. Because it was there that I learned something deeply uncomfortable. Faith without empathy is just noise. It doesn't matter how much scripture you can quote, how many followers you've got, or how well you defend your beliefs in a public debate. If your faith doesn't move you to feel the pain of others, truly, deeply feel it, then it's not faith at all. It's theatre. I watched a boy drag a bucket of water across a shattered road, barefoot and covered in dust. His sister followed, holding a pot. No parents in sight, no supervision, just two children surviving in a place the world loves to argue about, but few ever see. And you know what hit me hardest? It wasn't the destruction. It wasn't the hunger. It wasn't even the injustice. It was the calm look in their eyes. A calm that comes not from comfort, but from a soul hardened by reality and softened by belief. And I asked myself, where was my belief in that moment? Where was my empathy when I read about Gaza from behind a screen? Had I really cared? Or had I just observed, commented, analyzed like so many do from a safe emotional distance? That day, I realized something painfully clear. It's easy to say you believe in humanity, in peace, in God, when you're not standing in the ruins of someone else's life. Empathy isn't a performance. It's not about posting the right words or joining the right side of an online debate. It's about feeling what that child feels. It's about standing there and realizing that your version of the world might not be the only one, and certainly not the most accurate. Because I had grown up thinking I understood suffering. I didn't. Not until I stood among people who have nothing and still share, who have lost everything and still smile, who are ignored globally and yet never ignore their neighbors. What does that say about us, about me, about the world we've built where compassion has to be trending to matter? These people don't need pity. They don't even want it. What they deserve, what they demand, is recognition of their humanity, their dignity, their faith. And if yours doesn't allow you to see that, then maybe it's time to re-examine what you actually believe. Because real faith doesn't close its eyes to pain. It doesn't justify cruelty with verses. It doesn't look away. It kneels beside the broken, listens to the voiceless, and says, I see you, I feel you, I am with you. That's what Gaza taught me, not through words, but through a quiet, powerful empathy that I'll never forget and never again ignore. We live in a world obsessed with conversion, not of faith, but of opinions. People argue to win, not to understand. They want to be right more than they want to be real. And I'll admit, I was one of them. For years, I studied religion like a journalist, from a distance, analytically, always asking questions, always looking for contradictions, always separating faith from reality, until one moment in Palestine forced me to drop the pen and open my eyes. For a moment, I sat down and I said to myself, I'm too old, I'm too poor, I'm too weak, I'm too poor, I'm too fat, I'm too drunk, I'm a battery identity, from a distance, on land, and not in the same place. To me, the word religion made me draw, because Islam wasn't preached to me. It wasn't debated, it was shown. No scholar came to convince me. No one handed me a book or stood in front of a camera delivering a passionate monologue. What I saw was far more powerful than any lecture. It was a barefoot girl, maybe 10 years old, sweeping the broken floor of a room that barely had a wall standing. Her hijab was dusty, her hands were small, but her focus, her calm, was magnetic. And there was no audience, no reward, no one told her to do it, but she swept as if that floor was the most sacred ground in the world. It was dignity, it was discipline, it was worship disguised as simplicity. And it hit me, this wasn't religion for her, this was life. I've seen religions represented in cathedrals, ceremonies, and million-dollar campaigns, but never had I seen one so quietly, confidently lived, especially under fire. And the media shows us Islam through a lens of conflict. But that day, I saw it through the lens of resilience, patience, order, honor, and most of all, sincerity. There was something undeniably beautiful, even poetic, about how people held on to routine amidst the chaos, how they still prayed on time, still greeted each other with peace, still thanked God before eating whatever little food they had. These weren't grand gestures. There were daily choices made in the shadow of destruction. And that's what made it real, because real faith isn't loud. It's not desperate for approval. It doesn't need a microphone. It lives quietly in action, in behavior, in unwavering conviction, even when the world collapses around you. That's what I saw. That's what moved me. The Western narrative has always tried to explain Islam to me through headlines, through fear, through bias. But Gaza didn't explain Islam. It embodied it. In every smile shared between strangers, in every prayer uttered through pain, in every act of kindness when kindness felt impossible. And suddenly I understood something no book or broadcast had ever taught me. Faith that is lived consistently, especially under pressure, is far more persuasive than faith that is spoken loudly. These people weren't trying to convert anyone, they were simply being who they were. Muslims. And ironically, that's what converted my perspective. Because what I witnessed wasn't a belief system, it was a way of being, a way of surviving, a way of loving, even when unloved by the world. And that changed me. There's a point in every human life when the noise dies down, when the world stops listening, when the cameras turn off, the applause fades, and the comfort we cling to evaporates. And in that deafening silence, you're left with one thing, your core, your truth, your faith, if it exists at all. And the question that haunted me, truly haunted me, was this: what happens when everything is stripped away and all you have left is God? I found the answer not in a cathedral, not in a lecture hall, but in the bombed streets of Gaza. I saw a man standing beside the ruins of what was once his home. His face was lined, his beard grey, his eyes hollow but unbroken. Children clung to him. Women wept nearby. And as he stood there, surveying the ashes of his life, he raised his hands and he prayed, not with anger, not with demands, with surrender, with peace, with the kind of faith that doesn't beg for comfort, but draws strength from conviction. That moment took my breath away, because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't for show, it was deeply personal, and yet it was the most powerful public declaration of belief I'd ever witnessed. No words, no speeches, no camera angles could capture the enormity of it. It was just a man utterly broken by the world, and yet somehow unbreakable. You see, most of us think we have faith because we say the right things. We read the right books. We attend the right places of worship. But real faith, tested, refined, proven faith, is revealed only when everything else is gone. Would I pray standing in the ashes of my life? Would I thank God if my home was turned to dust? If my family was taken from me? If my future was nothing but rubble and ruin? These are not questions you ask in a vacuum. These are questions that expose the difference between faith as philosophy and faith as reality. And what I witnessed in that moment was reality. Raw, defiant, divine. The kind of faith that terrifies those of us who've never had to lean on anything but ourselves, because it shows us how fragile we really are. It reveals that much of what we call belief is just habit dressed up in holy words. But that man, he had nothing left to lean on. And still, he stood. Still, he prayed. Still, he believed. And that, to me, is the ultimate power, the kind that no war, no headline, no loss can touch, the kind that outlives grief, that transcends injustice, that echoes in eternity. And I walked away knowing something I can never unknow. Faith is not proven when life is easy. It's proven when life is impossible and you still bow, still breathe his name, still choose to rise. That's not weakness. That's the fiercest kind of strength I've ever seen.